Hello and welcome to another episode of the MIDierror Meets podcast, where we speak to all kinds of people working in sound and music. On the show this time, we've got Christian Kleine, aka Max4CATS, who has been on the Ableton team for 24 years, since version 0.9. So we talk about the whole development process Ableton has been through since then, and his 24-year career so far with Ableton, as well as the integration of Max4Live, which is Cycling 74's Max MSP development program within Ableton. A huge game changer really for people making their own devices, and still going strong and still one of the most accessible programming languages out there, in my opinion. We also talk about his music career and Max4CATS, his own side project of Max4Live devices. Please support Sonic State if you can. We do all this for the love of it, but it's great to get your support on Patreon and YouTube. And if you stick around to the end, I will recommend an episode of my podcast which relates to this one. Okay, let's get into the chat. And the first thing I asked Christian was about his surroundings.
At the moment, right. At the moment, I'm in the south of Germany in my workspace. I moved away from Berlin because we now have hybrid working with Ableton and you can move to other places. So I moved back to my origin where I come from, which is near the Alps.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like in the four-country region, like where you have Switzerland, Austria, Liechtenstein, and Germany. And you have the big Lake of Constance. So I grew up here, and I spent 30 years in Berlin, and now it was like a couple of months ago, it was time to move back because of my father is very old now, and I need to take care of a few things. Also, I couldn't take the big city anymore, really. I mean, I've seen it for 30 years, so it was a kind of a relief to get into the countryside again. So, yeah.
Amazing. Are you a country boy at heart? Is that how you feel this
Well,
way?
that's I don't know. That's a good question. I think I'm hybrid
Hybrid.
in that sense. So it depends on the age and context. So when I was younger, I was really, I need the big city to do the things, to get inspiration and all these things you can't do in the countryside. Basically, experience music, make connections, and all these things. And nowadays, have a little bit more gray hair, and I need to take a step back from all these late night activities, you know. So I rather go into the country to relax and after work and so on. So that's
I'm
great.
feeling that. I'm definitely feeling that. Did you go to Super Booth this year?
I did, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it's a great event, isn't it? We cover it with Sonic State every year.
Yeah, I know. I think I've seen you here, not you, but Sonic State. I've seen Sonic State there, and I mean, Superboost is really a wonderful thing. And who would have thought that it pans out that way? You know, I remember back in the days when Superboost was the small thing in Frankfurt Music Messe, you know, and now it's basically like it is. It's a big, nice global thing almost.
Yeah, and a massive children's play park.
Exactly. Indeed, indeed. But also the new generation of modular stuff and also all these crazy blinking lights business. Yeah,
It is amazing. It's the best event of the year.
it
It's
is.
like the event we look forward to most on the calendar.
It is, and it's amazing that I think there are a few equivalents like in the States and so on, but none as established or big as Superboost. Yeah,
Yeah, or just friendly, you know. You just see
friendly.
lots of people hugging and just genuine
Yeah,
friends
it's
there.
kind of a family event, isn't it? I mean, you meet people that like, and it feels like, oh yeah, we are all acquainted and somehow, and we know. I met a bunch of people who were working in different companies, and then now they work for another company, but in the same domain space, so to say. And it's always great to see the people like making stuff and yeah, and it's a friendly place, very friendly indeed, as you say.
Yeah. And what took your eye this year at Super Booth? What excited you that was at the show?
So there were a bunch of things actually, but currently I'm very excited about this Magnolia Italian synth, and I'm not sure if you heard about it. It's an Italian FM synthesizer, kind of West Coastish poly stuff.
Yeah.
So and yeah, as I said, an old acquaintance of mine works there for this company now, so I'm very curious. I just played it briefly at Super Boost, but I want to, yeah. So that was one thing. Oh, there were a bunch of other things like, but don't ask me now the details.
That's the same for us, with Sonic State. We shoot about 100 videos in 3 days, and don't ask us what the best thing is because we've just seen so many
There's
things.
so many things which I made notes to research later, and because sometimes if you lose track of it, it kind of disappears from your radar completely. But it's actually really great, and so yeah, these are all usually very small companies, so you need to kind of be very persistent and look and nag a little bit. Even it's sometimes not so easy to get their products because of maybe they don't have distribution yet or something, or they don't just make a little very little amount of these instruments or so. Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, it's often like one man operations, isn't it? I
Exactly, that's what
mean,
I mean. Yeah,
one man, one girl operations.
yeah,
So yeah, they have like the one person is the designer, the developer, the
exactly.
marketing person is all one guy.
And that's a difference, the big difference to the older days where you had Music Massive Frankfurt, where you had Yamaha, Roland, Korg, and so on, which was great too. But this is so very different, but so much so very nice in that sense because you can just talk to the maker of these things and have this exchange rather than to a sales representative or something.
Exactly, and
Mm.
it's so much warmer than an email.
Yeah,
I'm sure we could talk about Superbooth all day,
we could.
but we can probably move on. It looks like you already have a nice collection of synthesizers and gear behind you.
Well, I'm in the electronic thing for more than 30 years now, and over the years, I did buy and sell a lot of things. And well, yes, I do have a studio, which to me that's a nice thing. It's a one like 360-degree thing, like being an artist, being like working in this domain. So it's yeah. I'm a customer, and I'm a at the same time I'm a creator. So it's all of these
That's
things.
that's great. Yeah, what have you got? This release is going to be audio only. So can you just run us through
If you
some
have,
of your gear?
I'm
Not
not sure how
everything.
much time you have, but one thing which I really got the other day was the remake of what's it called? Oh, God, the, the Synthicon. The Synthicon. Do you know the Synthicon was?
I'm not familiar with it. No.
The Synthicon was
What did?
made in the 70s, a 70s synth. It's a thing on top here, the silver one. And
Hmm.
there was a very limited remake with the original Neil Steiner. Do you know Neil Steiner? Do you know Neil Steiner? From the famous
Familiar with his work?
Steiner
Yeah.
Parker Synthicon. So
Mm.
that's the name of the thing. And there was a remake of this, and it's just beautiful. It's a very original 70s analog, quirky analog synth. I love that stuff. And I actually, lots of the things I have nowadays are actually recreations. So I sold most of the originals, like the Prophet 5 here, you see, is actually also the newer one. Because the original one, I had the original one, but I'm not a collector. I just want to use those things and appreciate them. And I had a lot of maintenance burdens with those old machines over the years. And at some point, it was just too much to deal with. Yeah. So
Yes.
I sold a lot of the originals. So even I also got the OBX8 here, for
Oh
example.
wow.
Yeah, because I had the OBX and then it was never really properly working. So, well, this is now nice. And there's a GRP Italian synth, this big one, GRP A4. And GRP is kind of a special company. The creator is called Paolo Groppioni. That's why it's called GRP. And
Hmm.
he made these big synthesizers with lots of features. They are semi-modular in that sense. I love semi-modular stuff, by the way. So I'm not
Yes.
I don't have any modular system apart from some old 100M modules from Roland, but I don't have anything Eurorack because I deliberately stayed out of that. because on one hand I like systems which are designed from the designer. For example, the Buchla easel. I love the Buchla easel, or the EMS AKS. These kind of things, which are kind of machines designed by someone to be used with components to be connected. But of
Hmm.
course, the whole you can create it yourself with your rack, of course, but the options would be just too killing me. So basically, so that's why I love semi-modular and modular systems which are contained, basically.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you there. I don't have any Eurorack or any modular stuff,
Mm.
and for similar reasons, really.
Yeah.
I've seen what happens to people
Well,
when
my
they
main
start.
goal is actually to make music at the end of the day. I'm not this person who wants to just fiddle around and make some noises here and there. I want to make compositions and complete full-fledged records with everything. So, and my time is also limited, so to do that, it's another
Mm,
factor. So it's not my I'm not a musician in that sense, like who has like all the time in the world. But so yeah, and that's why it
yeah,
needs to be practical, pragmatic, and still nice. And yeah,
I think there is a balance, isn't there? There's definitely people who use modular and they do make music and they do finish it.
absolutely,
Like
sure,
I spoke to Raoul Funken a few
yeah,
episodes ago, who's an IDM producer,
yeah,
and yeah, he's really into it. He's
of
really
course.
into it, but he's prolific as well. You know, he still does output stuff. But yeah, I feel a similar way. I like the kind of groove boxes, and I like things that are kind of self-contained and
Yeah.
limited to a certain extent.
And then, my whole modular stuff, I kind of live out in software. Like, I mean, I did write a whole modular system in Max, for example, like OSCiLLOT and so on,
Yeah.
and things like that. So I can use that for modularish quotation aspirations in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So what just for people that don't know who you are and what you do, what do you do? I know a lot of people will be familiar with Max for Cats
So yeah, so
and your name.
MAX4CATS is a side project I did aside from my normal job which is at Ableton. I'm and so my main job is really working for Ableton, and I'm working for Ableton since 24 years now. So basically since its existence.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah, since version 0.9 to be precise. And I started as tech support and all these things. And after like over the years, I then did sound design and Max when the whole Max for Live stuff started with Live 8. I worked a lot with the Max for Live connection and this things. And nowadays, I'm leading a small team in the development unit where we do feature work for the actual application itself. Like sometimes that's Mac stuff, but usually it's normal features, C++ features, which you'll find then in the Live 12 versions and Live 11 and all these things. So just for an example, we did the auto shift, which is this auto tune device. That's one
Mhm.
thing, or lots of other. I did the Echo, I did the Melt synthesizer, and like that's for a lot of devices and effects. But nowadays, I'm working more on infrastructural topics, like outside
Mm.
of these things.
And do you develop those things in a different way from, say, the Max for Live tools?
Yes, I mean often I prototype things still in Max for Live, like just to get like the amount of things, how many knobs does a thing have, and like how does it feel, how does it kind of roughly look and so on. So that's easy to do in Max for Live because all the widgets are there, so you have the dials and the sliders and that as equivalent widgets, so you can quickly prototype things and even some DSP. Sometimes we write the DSP in C++ and write in Max external just to try out that stuff in Max for Live. But often it's just like a rough prototype and blueprint. And then we basically agree on something and do it for real quotation mark in the application, which is always interesting because the application itself is, as you know, it's like 20 plus years old, and it's a very gigantic um, application which does a million things. So you need to be very cautious of what you add where and why not, and how it interfaces with things. So that's a very tricky business, and you need to have good reasons for things to do them.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
But I mean, Ableton has just become such a such an iconic piece of software for so many people making music. People coming into making music now who I know who are picking up Ableton and loving the way it works. You know, from people who used it back in the day on version one and things like that. Yeah, just paint a picture. What did it look like when you had that version zero point 0.9? Like, what was the team like, and what was the? Did you have like what was your did you have like a vision
Of
for the
course, there was a
software?
very, very concrete vision. The vision was really bring computers into the creative space and bring them on stage. Because the big problem back then was that if you wanted to use computers on stage, your abilities and choices were very limited. And the ways how these things work were an analogy to a tape machine. That was it. Like Pro
Mm,
Tools, Logic, and so on, they were just tape machine style recording, tape machine style playback, and we wanted to break out of that. So that was the big vision with the live session view and so on, that you can time stretch and all these things in real time while you are playing, and not like offline process like now. It's all these things. So the whole idea was really make music making fluid, efficient, and also performative in that sense. So, and that was the big promise, but that promise is as true today as it was then. So it's not a one time approach or something. Yeah, and that's
yeah,
good. And that's I think one of the reasons why we're still here, because after all these years, that the whole idea is still valid, and it's not like, okay, we have seen it now and now that's done and that's what you can do with it now. Let's move on. Because that's not how it works. So it's kind of has itself established in a very nice way. I would think that we are now, I don't know, very widely accepted as like a main door, which of course back then was just a wishful thinking, because it was we didn't know how it will work out. Um,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's really incredible what you've managed to do. Who was on the team then? Who was on the team at zero point 0.9?
well,
Like,
we had
what?
about, let me, it's a long time ago, maybe 17, 18 people or something like that. Or maybe 15 to 20 people, between 15 and 20 people or so we had, as a team in those days. Yeah.
And did you have an interest? You said you joined as the tech support. Did
Yes.
you have like an interest or experience in programming prior,
Well,
like
I
before
was
this?
I was coming really from the musical side of things, so I was doing programming. Back in those days, I was going through all the available musical relevant programming things, C Sound, or what else was there? I think there was still
Reactor,
it was
early
called
reactor
Generator in the early days,
generator.
Generator in the early days, and all these things, and then of course Max, obviously, um, all the, symbolic sound, even like Kuma systems and so on.
Yeah.
So all these things which were around in the 90s, sort of, I kind of tried to navigate and to make things with them. So in that background did connect me initially also with Robert and Gerhard, who also were Berlin-based musicians doing music on stage and were doing Max programming and so on. So we had this connection already, and I met them during playing concerts in Berlin before there was the company actually founded. So I knew them already, and with that background, it was ideal to start. So I was not like a trained informatics person or something, and that was not my ambition at all. So I'm coming from the music side and from the practical side of playing on stage. And then, of course, I could not do programming at Ableton, but I was like tech support, which was well suited at the time for that stuff with that background. Yeah. And you had to make things up from scratch. There was no recipe for how do you do things. Like there were not even the tools you have nowadays. Like nowadays, there are so many tools that are catered to these very, very clear positions. So back then you had just to make it up as you go, and that was actually my benefiting me, because I'm very good at this kind of thing, like improvising, which comes again from the music stuff. So that's helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's really incredible what you've done as a team
Yeah,
collectively,
yeah.
and so many DAWs now kind of, I think, look at Ableton as the one to sort of emulate, or there's features that you find in DAWs that you say, oh, I think I saw that in Ableton like
I
two
mean, and
years
the
ago.
thing is, initially I thought, okay, maybe we have 3 4 years maybe, and then some other company, a big company, will just do it better than we did. Yeah, but it didn't happen. So
Hasn't
we
happened,
could
no.
continue what we did and make it better, and so others had to look at, oh, how did they do it, and now you see a lot of the things we had initially explored in as features in other DAWs, which is always kind of flattering. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned prototyping there. Like I work for GPU Audio
Yeah.
as well as Sonic State, and I also work for a company called Gravity Rigs.
Mhm.
But in working for GPU Audio, I've worked with a company called Mantra, who they're prototyping the plugin that we're releasing soon. That was prototyped originally in Max. Like, I
Well, it's
loved I loved the fact that I was like watching this company we're working with prototyping in Max, saying, I understand this, I
and
know what's
I
happening.
mean, I know from other companies as well, and I don't put out any names that they do that. Like now is like what Max has, Rainbow, for example. It's
Mm.
just such another level nowadays. It's much more than it was originally, and so you can. So Rainbow is a platform in Max where you can generate code and like compile it directly as a VST or as a web platform or whatever, all kinds of things. And that is, of course, liberating a lot of needs from otherwise tasks which you would have done in a certain specific application. But if you are familiar with Max, that's just another dimension then, as I said. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Rainbow's been amazing,
Yeah.
and it kind of, for I think for a lot of industry people, it came from nowhere. Well, maybe for a lot of Max4Live users, I'm a Max4Live user,
Yeah.
so I'm within that community. Like, I was like, wow, this is amazing what this can do.
Yeah.
So prior to that, I remember there was a thing called Pluggo,
Oh
which you
yes.
could use. You could use to export a VST. So I remember using Pluggo earlier, but you had to install Pluggo as well as the plugin,
Exactly.
didn't you? So it's
Exactly.
like it was tough for people because you had to say, well, set up this program and then download my DLL file,
I
and then you can use
I mean,
it.
I was an avid Plago user back in the days, and I have to say it was still a liberation, even though it was like jumping through a bunch of hurdles and fire rings. But it was for me as a music maker the only way to get like crazy ideas into my door of choice, sort of, because you otherwise had to rely on what they offer from themselves or what you can buy as a VST, which was of course back in those days much more limited than nowadays. And if you have some crazy ideas, I want like a ring modulator with frequency shifting and delay on top of it with equalizer or something, then you can create this with Pluggo and compile it as a VST and use it. And that was liberating. But from that, the whole Max for Life idea spawned, basically. That was the precursor, because it was the idea that, okay, you can, as a music maker, not only buy stuff, but actually, if you're interested, you can learn it yourself and do it. Just do it. I mean, that's much. I mean, even though it's not super easy, but it's much easier than learning actually programming and all these other stuff. So
Exactly.
yeah,
And there's a really good ecosystem around Max for Live
yeah,
and Max MSP,
yeah.
which supports learning. I think that's, like,
That's very important too. Yes, yeah.
yeah, like if you see a patch I've made or I see a patch you've made, I'll learn something about how you've done it, or see something that I did, an object that I wasn't familiar with doing something.
That aspect.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, that aspect of having the help, like when you Alt or Option click on an object, any object in Max for Live, you can find out what it's doing in context, and
it's
then also other
brilliant.
page. Like, it's brilliant,
Brilliant.
absolutely
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly.
Like,
I would have never learned it if it wouldn't be like for that. Like that is to me also what you just said, the fact that things are open source and you can look at other people's patches and everybody learns from each other, sort of. To me, that's like fantastic, because sometimes you look at patches which are 15 years old and think, oh, there's a problem has been solved in a beautiful, elegant way by someone, and now I can look at that, how it was solved, and just adapt it, and that's fine. That's the way how it's supposed to be in that context. So that's beautiful. You don't have to relearn from scratch, like if you or solve problems from scratch. In C++, you have to rely on maybe papers which have been written on a problem, and then you have to translate the paper equations into code and so on. It's much more tedious. So in here you can just look at things, sometimes just copy paste things, and
exactly.
fantastic. Yeah,
That's always whenever I'm working on a device, I always know the bits that I've worked on because
yeah,
it's really
yeah,
messy.
yeah.
And if I've taken it from someone else's patch, it's like super tidy and all the lines
So
are
you could
perfect.
say it's actually um, a really shared intelligence in that sense. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely, and for my own journey as well. I work with a friend of mine called Roger who lives in San Francisco,
Hmm.
and every week we work together on a Max4Live device, and we share the screen. And what we've learned from each other in a year, just meeting once a week for an hour, has been absolutely incredible.
Mm.
Like watch screen sharing,
Yeah,
watching someone else program and have the other person talking,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
the next week the other person is programming, the other person is talking. It's that is genuinely like shared
yeah,
intelligence
yeah,
that we've experienced.
yeah.
And is that a thing people do in Max for Life circles, like sharing the programming
Well,
together?
I don't know. I did it. So I did a lot of code sharing with people where we collectively worked on things. Yes, sometimes not, but in many projects I did that. So and it was always beneficial and always very interesting how other people think about something. Because it's amazing. You often think like, oh, there's just 3 ways to do it, but then you learn there are actually 50 ways to do it because someone else has completely different approach to the whole problem. So and would never have thought about this approach because your own experience is like teaching you, oh, actually I can solve it this way, but and so on. So there are so many levels to it. So I'm recently I worked a lot with Robert Henke on something, and it was he's a very different character than I am from his type, But I think we learned a lot from each other, sort of. That was kind of really great. Yeah.
It is really good, isn't it? And I would, like I think for a lot of people, when they think about Max for Live, they think it's going to be complicated and they think it's going to be maybe a program. It's maybe going to be like Reactor, which was, Reactor was amazing, but as an entry level into programming, it's kind of it's kind of quite complicated.
Yeah,
But Max for Live has so much great support within the system
yeah,
that you can look at a patch and click on any object and see what's there.
yeah.
So yeah, I just find it's so powerful. I imagine you're at the level where you can sit with a notebook in the park and design patches, right?
That's possible. Indeed, that's what you can do as well because so if someone wants to learn Max for Life, my recommendation is always learn the basic vocabulary, which is kind of learn maybe 150 objects, what they do. And if you know what they do and you have learned them by heart, then already you can do a lot of stuff. And 150 objects is not that much. You can learn them in 2 weeks, maybe, or something. I don't know how long it takes to learn 150 objects, but and but it's a mindset sort of. So I know also some people they really hate visual programming because they haven't learned it that way. So if you haven't learned visual, if you have learned normal programming, visual programming is for them, for those people, very very hard to grasp.
Mhm.
So I understand that as well. But if you're a non-programmer and want to learn programming, I find visual programming much easier because it's what you see is what you get. And if something doesn't work, you can visually try out things without like thinking about the problem. You can just intuitively basically use it rather than just thinking about it. You can actually see it, feel it, hear it, all these things. So
Absolutely.
it's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I always say to people like just making a bit crusher in Max for Live is it's kind of like 5 or 6 objects. It's not complicated.
Exactly. It's very easy.
And then to turn it from a mono bit crusher to a stereo one is just like a copy and paste and then joining things together.
Yeah. But you learn immediately about the concepts of audio. How is it like? What is audio? What is an audio stream? Like, and these kind of things. How do I? What numbers do I use to multiply or to make an audio stream more quiet and so on, and all these things. How do I multiply something? What's the effect of multiplying something? What's the effect of adding something? And these very basic things, they are so powerful, and you can experience them so nicely. And I love that. I think it's just so direct in that sense. Yeah. And a bit,
Mm,
yeah, and you can do these easy things like a bit crusher or a very simple filter or whatever. You can learn those quickly, and the nice thing is really you can then just experience it yourself. Like what does it do if I change this number? What does it do if I change that number, and so on. So this playful approach combined with some methodical thinking and so on is really nice. I think that's great. Yeah.
It is. It's amazing. It's so good. How did it come about that Max for Live is a thing? Because Max MSP by Cycling 74 was a separate piece of software.
Yes.
You could build standalone executables in it, and you could, yeah, you could do all kinds of things with it. I started on version 4 Max MSP. That's when I joined,
Yeah.
and I think you said you were there early days.
3 points something. 3 points something.
Yeah. And so, yeah, how did it come about that Max MSP became part of Ableton?
So it's a long story in the sense that we were with like cycling people and Ableton people were kind of friends, like Joshua Kid Clayton doing his music stuff and so on, and Robert and myself doing the music stuff, electronic weird music stuff. And so we knew each other, and we also, like, Robert did Max programming prior to me, and there was just this mutual mindset and mind space kind of thing. So they were then running their company, and I know that some people who were working at Ableton, they were also using a lot of MSP, like and so on. And even though we dabbled in all kinds of different territory, MSP was always like Max MSP was always like a fixed point sort of thing. And at some point, I think when Pluggo was a thing, and it was also dying because the Pluggo support wasn't sustainable. Like all the different formats was just killing them. So they at some point they said, okay, we can't continue Pluggo. But we were kind of interested as Ableton to have something like that, and of course you can't create that yourself. You couldn't recreate Max or something. So I think the logical step was to kind of join forces in that sense, because we knew each other already from a personal side, and we kind of appreciated what we did in the terms of technology. So that was a logical step then to kind of stick heads together and see what can come out with that. And we wanted to make life more modular anyway in that sense. So initially, before we had Max for Live integration, life was very, well, much more limited, obviously, and more like, okay, it's a DJ software for DJs, for performance and so on, and also for creation. But these other things which you, to expand things, like to have customized workflows with something, you can't you can't really, I mean, you can make the effort to come up with something like that. Like, and I think Logic has, for example, a JavaScript environment where you can do a little bit in this direction. Then, of course, Bitwig, which is much newer, has like a modular environment where you can also do things along those sides. But a true integration of another platform like Max MSP, where you can do video, where you can do whatever you can imagine, almost. That was a very attractive thing, of course. And yeah, so that's one of the reasons. So one reason was the personal connection, the other reason was the technological interest, and also the appreciation for the different tech stacks, basically. Yeah.
It must have taken. I mean, it's an amazing idea that to put those two things together. Quite adventurous
Adventurous
that you.
indeed, because initially, like, I think the first version when we had the Max for Live integration was Live 8, and Live 8 initially, the initial release was a lot of features, but it was compared to today's standards not as stable as today. And one reason was, of course, because we did so many things into version 8 back in the days. So, and it was a novel thing, very, yeah, adventurous in that sense. But I was kind of clear that it needs some ironing out of certain things and making things more I don't know, established, basically. And but I think we got that over the years, and nowadays it's really, to me, Max for Life is such an integral part now of life itself, so that it's really beautiful. Yeah, there's always
It
more.
really is.
There's always more you could think of. But what it is now is, it's beautiful, and it's totally great to see the ecosystem around that, and people on max4live.com and other companies which have Isotonic or so, these companies which have
Yeah.
formed around the idea that you can expand the idea of life and make it your own if you're into it, in all kinds of directions.
Yeah, with MIDI controllers, like Isotonic have
Yeah.
done. There's like a FL Studio hardware controller that Isotonic have done a patch for, which
Okay.
allows you to program like beats on a grid for in Ableton.
Okay.
Yeah, Max4Live.com. It's such an amazing resource
Yeah. Yeah.
for people that don't know. So if you own Max4Live or you have a studio license, you've got access to like how many thousand
Thousands.
free things?
Yeah.
So many.
Yeah.
And that am I right in thinking that there was one guy who set up Max4Live.com? Is
Yes.
that
Yes. Yes.
correct?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Was one person who had this idea to which was kind of logical. We didn't have the time and bandwidth to do it, so someone did it. Yeah, and we
Well,
in the end nowadays we take care of the platform because this single person at some point stepped out.
yeah,
So we now took over max4live.com as and basically yeah, it's a nice sharing thing, basically sharing platform. And
it's
people
amazing.
selling these things also. If you people spend a lot of effort making beautiful things, sell them for a few bucks. So it's a nice little ecosystem of, again, back to Superboost developers or something, like individuals who spend a lot of effort and blood and sweat and tears to create something beautiful and sell it for 15 bucks or whatever. And I think that's fantastic because if it, I mean, it won't pay their rent eventually, but it's always like a nice thing if you spend a lot of time on these things and they're useful to others, and then you ask, then that's like music making in the end, sort of. You spend a lot of time in your studio, make music, and you hope that someone buys it because they like it. And with Max for Life, it's kind of a similar thing, but not music. It's like technology in that sense.
Yeah, I can say for myself personally, I was making SysX editors for synths
Oh yeah, nice.
in Max MSP back in the day, and to be able to have them, like I remember I made a Waldorf Pulse controller in Max4Live and gave it away for free, and like it's amazing that like yeah, just the like you say, the ability that one person has to be like a whole software company,
Yeah.
uh, it's superb, isn't it? And you also talked about with your Max for Cat stuff, because I think for me, you're kind of like you've always been like the guru of Max for Live, of
It's
the
kind of
kind
funny.
of
Yeah, I mean, I since I started writing free software very early on, and then at some point, free software goes only so far. So I wanted to learn about mechanics, like, okay, what if I spend a lot of time on these and make it really nice and so on. But then, of course, I want to ask a little bit money for it, sure. And so it was a lot of learning involved here for me, and it was a nice, really good experience. I mean, nowadays I'm not can't do as much as I did because I did a I did day and night working at some point. Then at some point it was just too much. But creating like all these beautiful, especially synthesizers, which is my main interest, was my main interest, was total fun for me and a total fantastic experience to make it like a really something which other people just can use, which without like a lot of explanation, where they don't need to learn a lot. They can just install it, use it, thank you. And that's beautiful. I love that. So and
yeah,
without like without all the other hurdles you have to jump through usually. So if you set up a, I don't want to be a VST company or something like that. I'm not interested in that. I wanted to address the ecosystem in live Ableton Live, and to have a contribution there, which is where I thought, okay, that's stuff you can do with it. And if you spend time and effort on doing these things, yeah, and they're useful to me, to myself as well. So that's great. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's often a really good driving force, isn't it? If you need
yeah,
something and it works
yeah.
for other people to.
I mean, again, this modular system was like OSCiLLOT, which is you can install it in live, and it opens a little bit like Reactor or something. You can connect modules, which are again written in Max, but you can patch basically in live your modules. And to me, that was like a very interesting challenge to be able to, because I think the idea to nowadays there are many competitors on that level. Like I think when I did OSCiLLOT 10 years ago, there were not a lot of software where you could patch within an interface while you make music. So you always had to go into a certain operation mode of like editing or something where you couldn't make music. So that was the challenge with something like that. But you could, it was possible to pull off. So cool.
Mm. Yeah, the way that you can program live in Ableton, it's just like revolutionary, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah, just talking about your devices. So you've released the OSCiLLOT. You've also released a semi-modular synth called BENGAL.
BENGAL and Palace, which is a, so BENGAL was a semi-modular FM synthesizer with a bunch of features. Palace was like a virtual analog synth, also with a patch panel where you could patch like everything as you please. And they all have like a big breakout interface and these kind of things. But I did a lot of other things like time stretching thingies, cat stretch it's called. Then I did an emulation of an EMS synthesizer called SynthieCat. So it is kind of like this pin matrix, but actually it's more button pressing in that sense because there are no pins. But it's basically the same feature set. So if you don't have 15K dollars cash available to buy a real one, you can buy this version for 20 bucks or whatever it costs.
Yeah, and how did you go about, for example, for the SynthieCat, when there's a real existing unit and you want to kind of make a Max4Live version of it? What's your
My
process?
process
What's your
is, well,
process?
I can't obviously not clone it in detail. That's also not my ambition. My ambition is not to make like a clone like Arturia does, for example. They have clones, basically virtual clones. So my
Mm,
ambition is more like looking at the structure of a synth and the features, and then making something which uses similar features and structures. Like, and then of course resembles to some degree the original, but is not a, it's more like a version but not a clone, something like that. And the same is true, I did the same with like an SEM module, for example, or even the four voice Oberheim synth, where the idea is you have a morphing filter which morphs from high pass, bandpass, notch, low pass, and so on, and you have like bipolar knobs which do modulation. So I did that as well. Just, and it's not an Oberheim, obviously. It doesn't really sound like an Oberheim, but it has the same structure, and it's always interesting to experience the structure. And of course, certain sounds can only be done with such a structure. And that's to me the interesting appeal, that with, especially with the EMS thing, you can do a lot of feedback routings and so on, which is in software a very not difficult process to do, but it's possible with Max with certain tricks to get feedback routings and so on and so on. So there are a lot of these details which are made possible by cloning a structure rather than cloning the actual electrical components, which is a completely different process. So, and again, I'm
mm.
not interested, or also not capable of doing that, because there's software where you can just put a diagram in there, like a circuit board, and then it spills out the code for it. But I mean,
Wow.
yeah, can
Oh
do
my
all
God.
that. It's nowadays a very common practice that I mean, almost every synth on this planet has been cloned into software in several incarnations. And my
Yeah, there's one company that's done most of them.
Stereo audio, yeah, yeah, true, and Arturia as well. And I think that's totally fine, but that's not my interest. My interest is more looking at structures and see what can I do with that structure, and even maybe even expand on that structure.
Yeah, that was going to be, that's my follow-up question really, is like, in the development world, in the world of development, and when you're kind of getting excited about creative ideas,
Mm.
um, at what point do you limit yourself and say this is the finished one? I mean, it is like, how do you know when it's finished? I mean, it's a very generic question,
Well,
but
I
in your interpretation.
I I think the versioning helps, saying, okay, now this is version 1.0 or something. And that's why I made actually Max4CATS, to actually make this a goal that it can be released. So finished makes, is it also then when you have like not only the actual software, but also you have presets, you have a video for it, you have like some kind of marketing
Manual.
material, all this other stuff, which as a developer usually is something you don't think about, but then as a product person you need to think about it, and it's as important as the other stuff. So, and once I have this as a nice round bucket where all the assets are in, then I say, okay, it's finished. But of course, in my back of my head, there's also lots of voice. Oh, you could also do this and this feature and this feature, and millions of other features are popping up in my head. But it's at some point you need to just say, okay, this is it, and it's. But again, this the process is not different from music making. If you want to, you can write ideas forever, but if you want to put out a record, you need to be very aware of what it should be and how where it ends, because otherwise you make music forever but never release something. So, and I think the process is mentally for me not so different from writing music and make, because here's the thing. I have this ambition to make one release, like a record, be it physical or digital, per year. So that's just like a thing for me, because
Nice.
my favorite bands always did that when I was a young person, that every year there was a record from my favorite band. And so I kind of took this as like a standard, that once a year you put out a record. But to do that, you need to be very organized about, and like round it off, and collect the tracks and make the tracks finished and be happy with them, even though you have always ideas how they could be different or whatever. But to kind of seal things off, basically. I think that's a nice learning you can propose to yourself, sort of. By next month, I have finished the song.
Yeah, like a sense of
A
urgency.
sense of urgency, exactly. And I think some in our world that's missing, because everything is so exchangeable. And I started making music, for example, when it was expensive to record. I had to buy a DAT, digital audio tape, and everything was kind of expensive in that sense. And nowadays you can just record on your hard drive a gazillion of songs and just erase them again with one blink of the eye, and nothing matters anymore. But of course, the urgency needs to be there, right?
Yeah, I often get tempted to do that with my back catalog, just select them all and just delete. But I like how you're approaching what you're doing, and I wasn't aware that you had that objective of getting an album out or some music out every year. I think that's really a nice thing to aim for. And yeah, you released electronic music for the Lost World Volume 2.
Yeah, which was a collection
So
of older stuff, which kind of liberated me from one other year to work on new stuff, because I moved houses and so on. So I had to rebuild the studio, blah blah blah. Took a lot of time. Now I have a studio back and work on music when time allows, and so yeah. But yeah, I think the same is true for software and so on. For everything needs to have its circle and its time, like the seasons, they come and go, and I think the same is true for creative output.
And do you share early patches with people to see how they're going, see what people think of your stuff? Do you have like a group?
I don't have a group now. No, I don't have that. It's more like, maybe I have, in the sense that I have colleagues and friends, but not like internet or something like that.
Mm,
Internet people. So I don't have like this. I have a forum, and I don't know. I don't have anything like that. I don't care. Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I think it is important to get when you're making and releasing software, it really is important to get the way that it looks right for people. Um,
Yeah, but it's also a question of like how important. I mean, for me, it must look right, and because I'm the creator, I can do whatever I want. I'm not a company. I don't need to make money with that, in that sense, So that it's a very different mindset, of course. So the only standard is established by myself.
that's good. And you clearly have high standards
I,
for
I
yourself,
mean,
which is good.
at least I try to, but I also saw that in the last couple of years, the standard really shifted higher and higher and higher. And nowadays, people write like beautiful JavaScript UIs and all these things. It's amazing how to what lengths people go these days. So, and I
Yeah,
must
even
say,
with, sorry, go on.
I just want to finish that. I must say, I feel like, okay, this is now another level up, where I think, okay, that's cool, but I can't compete because I don't have the time.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about your custom UIs, but first, just to respond to that, there's a guy called Ewan Bristow who makes stuff in Pure Data,
Okay.
and his UIs are unbelievable. Like, I can't believe it's Pure Data. Everything I've ever made in Pure Data looks like Pure Data, you know?
Yeah.
But there's this guy, he's given away a lot of free plugins. I've occasionally posted them on Sonic State.
Mhm.
Very talented. And yeah, custom UIs really Yeah, you can really look fantastic, and I think a lot of what you've done in Max4Live and your Max devices have inspired people to level up and to get their
I
UI.
hope so. I mean, it was a big ambition to make things beautiful or nice at least. I mean, and to make them not look like, oh, this is a weird Max patch, which is one thing. You can do things that's totally fine. But my interest was really to make something which is has its own character, has its own charm, has its own style, and so on. And then you think a lot about all kinds of things like what kind of knobs do you use and how do you use them and what kind of coloring and color scheme do you use, how does the color scheme interact with things and whatnot, all these details which you otherwise wouldn't think about if you just program something. And
Mm,
so,
and
and then
how
again,
how are you building those? How are you building those custom UIs? Like, what are you using to make it look that great? Because I mean, I use the default objects. I use all the default objects. Gradient is probably my most advanced
gradient.
UI object.
So some of the one thing to know is that some of the widgets which are standard objects, you can use an override function with JavaScript to make them appear differently, but they will inherit the same functionality, which is important. So all the
Mhm.
functionality like key mapping, MIDI mapping, and all these things which are so nicely integrated into the Ableton system, they need to be there because if you just use, let's say, a picture control like a normal dial, which is made out of stitched pictures, that doesn't give you any functionality. So you need to kind of add it somehow to it so that it works nicely in life with automation, modulation, and all these things which are important. So you can use a JavaScript overlay basically to an existing object and change the appearance of something. And that's one way to do it. But the majority is really also working on little icons and to make it nice with icons. I love icons and these kind of things which are just so helpful and playful and telling. And but it's hard because I'm also not a graphic designer, and so you kind of need to dabble into all these territories, graphic design and UI design and whatnot. And of course, you are only a single person. So the question is like, and then the question is also like, is it worth it for that thing and so on? But yeah, that's another question.
Yeah, I think it is. I think the presentation often the sound is primary, but I think often the presentation is what pulls people in the
Of course,
beginning. You know, if you think about yeah, it'd be nice to know what sort of plugins that are not Max4Live like inspire you or have inspired you over the years.
that's a plugins. Yeah, plugins. That's a good question. The whole plugin world is a little bit on and off with me. Often I look into what VSTs offer, obviously also for professional reasons. But I wouldn't say there's maybe things like the what's the company called? Randy is his name. He did things like Alto and Kaivo. Do you know these?
Not, I've
Alto.
probably seen them at some point.
Google it. Then you will know it. I'm sure. Alto with 2A. Kaivo. It's kind of experimental VSTs in a way. And the company is called has escaped me.
Oh,
But
Madrona Labs.
Madrona Labs, exactly. So
Yes, we've done a few videos with
yeah, so
them
that
on
that's
Sonic
that
State.
that's just one example of things which I find kind of inspiring, and of course things like the Valhalla stuff, really simple UI but absolute fantastic DSP. These things, I mean, it's a very, I don't know, there's so many things. Even um, need to think.
Fab filter stuff always
Well,
just
Fab
looks and
Filter
sounds
stuff
great.
is it's amazing how established they have themselves. That's kind of amazing. If you ask them what's your favorite EQ, oh, it's Fab Filter. This is almost always the answer, and it's interesting to look into this why. Uh, but actually, I'm always drawn to the more, let's say, obscure things in that sense. I mean, sometimes it's nice to have big stuff or even emulations. It's very useful, and I find that I'm always investigating. Oh, how good is the emulation or something like that. I find it interesting. But I'm usually inspired by more experimental things in that world because I'm always interested. Okay, where could the journey go with general music making, with plugins, and with sound in general in that sense? Because over the last decades, obviously a lot of stuff happened, especially in software world, and things are now possible which are, I mean, I must say sometimes even 20 years ago there were amazing stuff, but now it has just, similar to modular world in a physical sense, it has also exploded in that way. So nowadays it's just almost endless what things you can use and how you can use them. It's like terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah, it is. I mean, Google Magenta
Google
was built
Magenta, yeah,
in Max
interesting.
for
Yeah,
Live, which was like crossfading between four sound sources,
exactly.
like a
Yeah.
so yeah, amazing sort of prototyping of that. Yeah, I mean, where do you see the audio landscape going in the next few
Well,
years?
that's
Like,
a
just
little bit interesting open question, especially in the light of the AI business currently happening. So there are a few questions around that which are completely impossible to answer. But I do think this will play a role, and maybe a bigger role, because certainly certain tasks are completely possible with this computing power, which otherwise were not possible. And I'm thinking about things such as, I don't know, even, when you think about Fourier synthesis, things like that, where it's really complicated to recreate. Fourier synthesis, first of all, makes it possible to recreate any sound theoretically in the world, right? Theoretically. Practically, that's really hard. Really, really, really hard. So, especially movement and sound with Fourier synthesis. But I believe that something like AI technology could theoretically make that possible. And it's already happening with voices and so on. I mean, there are videos of people which they sound like these people they're speaking, but they are not these people who are speak. It's recreation in that sense. I think this will happen in the audio sector, that there will be a lot of recreation, and that poses a lot of questions. Like, let's say you have your funky drummer drum loop, right? Formerly, there was, everybody knows that that's the funky drummer drum loop from the original 60s band or whatever. But if that's now being recreated, who owns the copyright and all these things? And so, to me, that's an interesting question about what do we want to have, like in terms of sound, and where do we want to go. And I think I still believe that creativity itself needs to be in the hand of the human person, because otherwise it's kind of not really gratifying and satisfying. So it's,
mm,
to me, it's like the feeling you get when you watch all these AI videos, then you think, okay, that's completely crazy impossible stuff, but actually it doesn't touch me. So it's just something you watch and have no feeling for.
yeah,
So, and I think that's the difference between someone writing a little ring modulator in Max, where you can feel, and oh, I did that, and so on, and that thing, a really simple basic thing, and all this crazy over the top stuff with AI. So, and I think there needs to be found the balance between what you do as a person and what you learn, and what the machine does for you. So, and I, just to sum up, I believe we need, the big challenge now is to find the right middle ground between all these things. And I think that's the journey where audio needs to go, sort of, and find. So I, in terms of sound, I mean, there was a time where there was a problem with, like, the noise floor or something in recordings. I think that's not a problem anymore. Nobody cares about this
yeah.
anymore. I mean, yeah,
I think, yeah, that's something that is exciting for me. Is, yeah, those kind of noise reduction things that can just take away things that have plagued a
yeah,
mix
yeah,
or something, or those kind of utilities that that AI could do.
yeah.
And do you think, what do you think about like latency with all that kind of stuff? Like, how will the processing occur?
Well, latency is obviously a constant issue in many levels, on many levels, because sometimes, because of the technology used, like there are certain technologies where FFT, for example, if it's has latency, and I have not seen any groundbreaking developments how this can be zero, because maybe it can't. And so it's an interesting question, but of course it's again some kind of shifting around. It's similar, like light traveling at light speed. I mean, you can't. I mean, so, but latency will not go away. That's I think that's I would. You can quote me on that. But
Yeah, I mean, we have super powerful
yeah,
machines now with, really powerful, and like I said earlier, I work for GPU
yeah,
audio, so there's a lot of convolution kind of stuff that is easy to offload with that technology,
yeah.
but the latency has to be good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that is understood, but then nowadays, maybe it will be easier for the user to, or the machine will adjust the latency so that the user will not notice it, because that's maybe something nowadays you have to understand it yourself, how things work together. And maybe that understanding might go away because it will be readjusted automatically and just you will be just informed, because nowadays you need to understand the audio driver latency, the computational latency within the application, and so on, and all these things you need to kind of understand in order to minimize it yourself the best way possible. But maybe that will go away in the sense that the machine can optimize it for you much more. Yeah,
Mm, mm.
I could imagine at least.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? It's really mind-boggling. But yeah, so just to in summary, like you do work on Max for Cats devices, you have your own things. You've also built a lot of the internal Max for Live Ableton stuff, not
Ableton
Max
stuff,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. Not so much Mac
Like
stuff in for Ableton, yeah.
yeah, like the LFO, which everyone's used like a million times. You did that, and
Right.
the Meld, Echo, Raw.
Raw, I didn't do that. Was a colleague of mine, but
Oh, okay.
as I said, I did a lot of devices, many of devices over the last years. Nowadays, again, I'm more in the infrastructural stuff. I don't do devices anymore, but features which might you might see in the future, which are more integral than a device. A device is always like almost isolated in the sense that almost like a plugin, but of course it's integrated. But now I'm working more on the application itself and its features. Yeah,
Great, man. I mean, that sounds hugely complicated to me. What I love is the fact that you have like API controls
yeah.
in Max for Live, so you can mute tracks, you can solo tracks, you can do all kinds of really interesting. You can have your Max for Live device make a new track and name it and all that kind of stuff.
You can, as
It's
the
amazing.
imagination is your limitation, almost, but it's also, I must say, it's also not easy to do that. Like even if you're an experienced programmer using the API and Max for Live, it's some things are tedious and hard to do, but you can do it if you want. And there are people who did crazy stuff.
Yeah, I really want to thank you, man, for what you've done, like for Ableton and for just for like the Max community, because you've really inspired a lot of people. You've kind of set the bar so high in making devices, and it's got better every year. This system.
It's fantastic to hear, of course, but I have to say I must thank cycling because they made it possible. So they're my heroes in that sense. So and I was always in close contact with everyone, with the people at cycling, to kind of discuss where should we put effort in and what things need to be different and so on. So without, I mean, I have to thank cycling. I'm just a little middleman here, you know.
Yeah, we've done a great job. I think through my experience single-handedly for about 15 years, maybe something like that. But now I'm working with Roger. Like
Mhm.
I see so many more features that I didn't know
Yeah,
existed,
yeah.
and functionality wise, just being able to align elements and make things tidy. And there are so many things that are just it just makes the experience so beautiful because I compare it to what it was like when it was Max MSP 4
Yeah.
and you had to, let's say you had 15 objects here and one object and you had to connect a cable from all those
Yeah, yeah,
15
yeah,
things,
yeah.
or if it was 64 things,
Yeah.
that would be like 20 minutes of just
Exactly. Yeah.
doing cables.
Yeah.
And now you have like shortcut which will just do it in like one click. I love that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this has evolved a lot, and I mean, to me, the great thing is that it's a consistent thing over so many years now. Like cycling exists like since '96 or '95 or something like this, and you can even load patches from those old days, and they're still working and so on. It's really fantastic and a nice ecosystem and really nice people. So that's
Yeah,
always
that
important to
helps.
me.
That is important. And as you mentioned with Rainbow, there is now the ability to export VSTs, also Raspberry Pi
Yes, yes.
hardware. So like you could make, if you get into using Max4Live or Max MSP and you use Rainbow, you can make like hardware gear.
You can make hardware, and people do that. There are like guitar pedals out there and this kind of stuff which use that, and you can customize it. I think there's even Eventide, which has a connection. Eventide, the H8000 flagship Eventide thing, where you can run rainbow patches or something like that. Yes,
Wow,
if you want
that's
that, but
cool.
that is a it is something for the big studios. Not for me.
Yeah, amazing. Um, is there anything that you would like to direct listeners to of yours or of Ableton's that you would like to shine a light on?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, of course, I'm always happy if people stop by my Bandcamp page, for example, and listen to my music, what I've done over the years. That's one thing. It's Christian Kleine Bandcamp page, easy to find. And other than that, well, people hopefully enjoy the work we are doing with Ableton, and they will be amazed what will come in the next years because we are working on amazing stuff. And Max4CATS, I hope I can also do something because right now I'm not doing a lot with Max4CATS because I don't have the time. But that's always like an on-off thing a bit with my time and my and my interests and aspirations and so on. Yeah.
Mm. And of course, you've got to enjoy the countryside as well.
And
That's also part
exactly,
of.
I need to embrace the nature a bit, and there are mountains waiting for me to, to climb on, and all these things.
Yeah, great. Well, we really appreciate all of your work, and it's been amazing to hear from you. So yeah, thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Thanks.
Wow, what a great conversation. What a great guy. He really has been one of the Max4Live gurus. And that's the first time I ever met him, first time I ever spoke to him that wasn't an email. So got huge gratitude to him and the Ableton team for what they've done with Max4Live, but also with Ableton as well. It's such an amazing piece of software. And I really appreciate his time and look forward to what where Ableton's going to go next. Also, a quick plug for my own Max4Live store and my own Max4Live devices. I've got loads of synth editors, SysX, CC controllers, interesting processing devices in my Gumroad store. So I'll link to that in the description and you can check it out too. Once again, thank you so much for listening to the episode. I'm going to recommend an episode from season 1 of my interview series. This one is with Tim Exile, who obviously programs his own software in a similar way to Christian Kleine. I interviewed him a few years ago now, but so much of it is still relevant, and I will link to that episode in the description here, so go and check that out. Thank you very much for listening once again. Do remember you can support Sonic State on Patreon. You can also support us on YouTube memberships. Thank you once again for listening. Look out for another episode in roughly a couple of weeks, and I'll see you again soon.